that's easier stuff to get your hands on versus the stuff that I have, which is early days in the first early years. And the reason why I'm doing this is because obviously, I can't tell the whole fucking story and go through every rat file of Greg Scarpa. It's just impossible. We would be here for the next year. So what I did was I've gone through thousands of pages just from the first year to 3 years that he was in, just as a reference point to show you that the amount of information that he gave is just insane. Okay. And we know why he did it. Not to regurgitate everything that we've talked about the last 2 weeks. But we know that Greg Scarpa wanted to rise the ranks within organized crime. He didn't have the capability to do it on his own merits, meaning he didn't have any earning capacity. He couldn't earn money. So he needed the FBI's help in paying him for information so that he could turn around and let me turn this up. And so he could turn around and effectively use the money from payments from the FBI to kick up to his superiors to try to get to a higher rank. Now, what we know is this. Greg Scarpa was not inducted into the Mafia until 1958 or 1951. He claims to the FBI by 1962 he was a captain. That is not true. He did not become a captain until 1977. Those are facts. Now, today what you're going to hear is two variations that he tells the FBI about how he became a captain. The first one is that he went to a meeting at Joe Magliocco's home, and Joe Magliocco told him he was a captain. That's fucking nonsense, because a non-hierarchical figure would not have been in Joe Magliocco's home. That's number one. But then not like 2 months after he tells the FBI this, he says that Joe Profaci made him a captain. And I just, I don't believe any of that either. Unfortunately, Joe Profaci died in 1962 of cancer. How is it that Greg Scarpa doesn't really get inducted until, like I said, 58, 59, or 60? You mean to tell me within 24 months he's a captain by Joe Profaci, but then he changes the story and changes it to Joe Magliocco making him a captain? It just doesn't make much sense. And the reason why it doesn't make sense is because it's not true. He lied, okay? He would not have been in a position to be in hierarchical meetings. This is what a lot of informants typically do. They inflate who they are. And he has to do it because the FBI has no way of proving that it's not true. But if the information coming forth, they can corroborate some of it, it means he's giving them good intel, which means the more he talks, the more descriptive he gets, the more money he's going to get paid. And we've talked the last 2 weeks, just within a year or 2 years, over $250,000. And this is in 1962. I'm hoping today that we're going to get to the part of Joe Valachi. I don't know if we're going to get there because sitting in front of me, I have like 50 some pages of stuff I want to get through. I just don't know if we will. And so if we don't, that will be the bulk of the discussion next week. And next week will be the last sort of show. But what I will do next week is sort of encapsulate and highlight some of the things that he would end up doing. We know, for example, that he played Carmine Persco and basically initiated and started the third war within the Colombo crime family. And it's my belief that Greg Scarpa wanted to be the first mob boss to be an informant at the same time. That's truly what I think his angle was. So who knows? Who knows? So like I said, we're going to be a little bit all over the place today. Just hang on with me. Just because I still think even if we're not weaving necessarily a story, there is a narrative here. And so basically, some of this will be regurgitated because he consistently kept doing it, but he sits down with the FBI and he basically states that each family throughout the world is made up generally the same way and carries the same titles and positions. So what does he do? He starts naming positions. The boss or the representative. He's the head of the family and is automatically the head of the family of a member of the overall governing body of the organization, which is known as the commission. The underboss, the person who will act as the boss in his absence. He's the number two in the family. The consigliere acts as a neutral counsel for anybody in a family who needs his advice or services in settling disputes. The capo regime, or the captain, is a person who has a group of members in the organization underneath of him who follows his directions and orders. The captain relays orders from the boss to the individuals within the organized crime family. The acting captain, that's a person who is appointed by the captain with the approval of the boss, who acts as the captain in his absence and assists in controlling of the members in general. Goodfellas, or Goodfellows, is a button man or someone who's a soldier within a crime family. These terms are synonymous that indicate that the persons are members of the organization who have not attained any rank or position of authority, kind of like Greg Scarpa. The informant would advise that the procedure for making new members, and we've talked about that, he basically runs through the induction ceremony. So for anybody to tell you that Joe Valachi's the guy that did all of this, it's just not true. So I said earlier, at the beginning of the show, I wanted to talk about Joe Magliocco, and this is very important. Okay, so we're going to go back in history a little bit. More or less, we know that Joe Magliocco ends up taking over the crime family. Now, was he a popular boss or not? No, he really wasn't. Things were very unsettled during that time period, but one of the things that Joe Magliocco was doing was restructuring his crime family, and not everybody was a fan of that. And Joe Magliocco still had the issue of the Gallos. They were still kind of running around making demands, but it wasn't nearly as sort of violent as it would be once Joe Colombo comes around, and then shit gets started up once again. But here's what we do know. Joe Colombo became a captain under Magliocco, and he was Magliocco's go-to guy for taking care of murders. Joe Colombo, by all accounts, was a loyal guy, but he had ambition just like everybody else. And what ends up happening historically is Joe Magliocco begins to suspect that Carlo Gambino is backing Joey Gallo behind the scenes. That is accurate information. We know that. We've talked about it. And Carlo's whole sort of, and it really did not take fruition completely, okay, until Joe Colombo takes over. Because I think Magliocco was smarter than Joe Colombo in a lot of ways, but Magliocco is going to make some bad decisions. And so basically the short end of what happens is that Joe Colombo gets word that Joe Magliocco wants to take over the commission, and he wants to do it in tandem with Joe Bonanno. Joe Bonanno wants to do this because he doesn't like the Lucchese's, the Gambinos, or the Genovese's being aligned, because it simply means that if anything goes to a commission vote, he's going to get fucked. He's going to get fucked because him and Bonanno would be sided together, so that's 2 votes, and then you've got the other 3. All right, so the idea that every crime family in the United States had a seat on the commission, that is accurate, but they not all had a vote in everything that was going on. New York business was New York business. So the simple idea here was Joe Bonanno goes to Joe Magliocco and he says, listen, I don't like the power grab that's going on with Gambino, Lucchese, and Genovese. Let's kill them, take over. You can keep your family. I will keep mine. Then new people that come in they believed if they kill Gambino, Lucchese, and some other people, they believed that they would control the commission. I don't know what the fuck made them think that, but that is what they wanted to do. And what ends up happening is that Joe Colombo gets handed the task of setting up the murder of Carlo Gambino and other bosses. Now, I'm not Joe Colombo. I wasn't standing next to him. I don't know what the process of his thought was, but I believe, just using my street intuition here a little bit, he knows that he can make a choice here. His choice is one of a couple of things. He can act and hope to God that they're actually all killed, and then he has to hope that Magliocco doesn't kill him just to get rid of the guy who did it, and then he has to hope that somebody does not retaliate from one of the other 3 crime families, which inevitably would have probably been the case. So rather than do that, Joe Colombo recognizes that if he tells Gambino, then Magliocco is either going to get killed or forced out, and that maybe he can use that to gain his own headway, because without doing this, he's not going anywhere anytime soon. So what happens? He ends up telling Carlo Gambino, there's a big commission meeting. They ask Magliocco to show up. He does. They ask him point blank, and they asked Joe Bonanno to show up, who didn't. He took off and went into hiding like a chicken shit. They asked Magliocco, is this true what we're hearing? And he admits it. He says, yeah, absolutely. That was something we were going to do. We were putting it in motion. And he didn't have to do that. He could have literally told the commission go fuck themselves and could have gone to war. But I think he chose at the end of the day that he's not going to live if 3 families want to kill him. It's just, and he has his own issues within his own crime family to begin with. So the best option that he has is to throw himself on the sword and hope to God that the commission takes pity on him, which they do. The commission believed that Magliocco wasn't brazen enough, ballsy enough, or smart enough to do it on his own, and so naturally they blamed Joe Bonanno for the whole fucking thing. But as a result of this, Joe Magliocco was thrown out of the Mafia. He has to pay like a $50,000 fine, and he's told, if you get involved in any sort of crime, we will fucking kill you. Bottom line, end of story, good day to you, sir. And as a reward for snitching out Magliocco, Joe Colombo would become the boss of what we know as the Colombo crime family, not the Profaci crime family. So a part of the reason why I'm bringing all of this up is because today we're going to hear some very interesting things on behalf of the piece of shit Greg Scarpa about Joe Magliocco. Some things are very interesting because when you do research on Joe Magliocco, usually typically what you're really going to find is a lot of stuff that involves the idea of the coup to take over the commission. But the day-to-day operations and stuff, and I'm not saying what Greg Scarpa says in these papers is accurate. In most cases, I would say that maybe 5% of what he said is accurate. The rest is all bullshit. And you're going to find out how bad of bullshit it is. So like I said, it's going to be a little bit all over the place, but just hang in tight. We'll try to get through as much as we can today. And if we can't finish today, we'll wrap it up next week. Which we were planning another show for this next week anyway. So Informant advised that he had heard that Colodro Lo Cicero, Charlie Lo Cicero, has booked passage to the United States and is due to return in New York City on 8/7/1962. The informant advised that he does not know what position Lo Cicero is in as far as Joe Magliocco and the rest of the family are concerned. And last week, we told you that Scarpa told them that Lo Cicero was on the outs. He was done with them. They had basically shelved him. So here he is saying now he doesn't know. How can you know one week and not know the next week? And this is important because there's going to be a coup that's going to start, and you're going to see which way this goes. Let's see, where are we? He stated that he received indication, which he interpreted as meaning that Lo Cicero is most definitely probably out of favor as far as the family is concerned. And it appears that Lo Cicero is in trouble as a result of his dealings with Larry and Joe Gallo, because Lo Cicero was quietly and secretly backing them because he wanted to be the boss, and he didn't like the fact that the Magliocco was boss. So keep in mind, Scarpa just said that Lo Cicero 2 weeks ago, or last week when we talked, he said Lo Cicero was a nobody anymore. Now he's saying, I'm not sure, but it's likely that he is no longer, anything, but I'm not 100% sure either. He points out, however, that this could be wrong, and actually Lo Cicero is acting with the knowledge of the heads of the family. You can't have it all 3 ways. You're either in or you're out. There's no foot in, foot out, and it's just, so like I said, this is Scarpa just feeding them whatever he can to keep the cycle going. The informant advised us on 8/7/1962 that on 8/2/62, he was accompanied by Ambrose Magliocco to the Long Island residence of Joe Magliocco. The informant stated that when he arrived at Magliocco's home, the following individuals were present: Joe Magliocco, Ambrose Magliocco, Joe Colombo, and Sal Profaci. So here's the thing about that. I doubt that ever happened. I doubt it. Why would Greg Scarpa, of all people, who was not a captain at this time, even though he says he was, why would he be at the home at Joe Magliocco, Ambrose Magliocco, who was a captain, Joe Colombo, who was a captain, Sal Profaci, who was Joe Profaci's brother, is a high-end capo? Why the fuck is just a regular made guy there? Why is he even called to be there? Does that make sense to you on any level? It makes zero sense to me. And this is where it gets interesting. The informant stated that there was a friendly greeting between the various individuals present and a general conversation which really was of no pertinence to organized crime. The informant related, however, that there was a long private conversation between Joe Magliocco, Greg Scarpa, and Magliocco informed him that all the individuals in the family who were running bookmaking operations, horse gambling parlors, were being asked to contribute $100 a month for the expenses of the family in connection with the Gallo feud. He advised Magliocco that he would be more than willing to contribute the $100 a month and felt that it would be a privilege to be able to serve in this manner. Magliocco then stated to Informant that Informant was now a captain in the Magliocco crime family. Come on. It's just ridiculous. Then Informant explained to Joe Magliocco about the money that was stolen from him and the fact that Carmine Persico is trying to intercede on the behalf of Scarpa in regard to that money. Informant advised Magliocco that if an arrangement could be made to collect his $100 a month, he could be paid until he was able to collect money from Persico, then he would contribute. So in other words, I don't have any money, but because my money was stolen, I can't give you anything. Yeah, right. So they're going to make that guy a captain who doesn't have $100. Really? Come on. Let's see. Gallo crew. Okay. The informant stated that Carmine Persico is living with Magliocco in his Long Island home and is acting as a kind of spy or information gatherer for Magliocco to determine how various members of the family feel towards Magliocco and the new organization of the family. Informant related that he will be coming to Brooklyn on 8/8/62 for a meeting with Carmine Persico. However, the informant is not aware of the purpose of this meeting. So in other words, Scarpa's asked to attend a meeting by Carmine Persico. Once again, Persico was not a captain at that time either. And Persico, they called him the Snake because he was using the gallows against the Maglioccos. But as far as Carmine Persico living with Joe Magliocco, that's not true at all. It's not true at all. And I have a hard time believing that Greg Scarpa, of all the fucking people, of all the people involved in the Colombos at this time, that's the one guy that they're going to invite to the house. I just don't buy it. I just don't fucking buy it. On 7/16/62, informant furnished the following information. He stated that he had seen Ambrose Magliocco during the morning and that Magliocco had advised him that two new captains, namely Sonny Francis and Joe Colombo, had been appointed in the Profaci family, but they were already captains. That's why they were meeting at the house. He stated that Ambrose had also advised him that the family is going to be reorganized and that each captain would have only 6 men under him. Therefore, each regime would consist of only 7. The informant stated that there was no mention of any additional captains being appointed and that he, Greg Scarpa, felt that the above 2 individuals were appointed because of their extremely close relationship with Sally the Sheik, and that Sally the Sheik, in turn, is a strong backer of Joe Magliocco. The informant stated that a good fellow known to him only as Buster runs a numbers operation for Sonny Francis at the Greenpoint section of Brooklyn. He stated that he heard that this is a huge operation that is bankrolled financially by Francis personally. The informant furnished the following list of individuals who were formerly buttons in the Profaci but broke away with the Gallo group. Carmine Persico, Joe Gielli, Jiggs Furlano, Larry and Joe Gallo. Let's see. On the morning of 8/21/62, informant was contacted by Vincent Mangano. Okay, so if you're a history buff, I hope you know why I'm laughing at that. On the morning of 8/21/62, informant was contacted by Vincent Mangano. Vincent Mangano disappeared in 1951. He disappeared in 1951. What the fuck? Were you visiting his ghost? Is that what you was doing? He disappeared in 1951. Out of fuck. Jesus. When the informant arrived at the office of Magliocco, he noted a black sedan parked in front of the office. The informant previously reported that a car is driven by the individual who is a made man in the Gambino crime family. A check of the above license plate, which was previously obtained by the New York State Motor Vehicle Bureau, reflects that this car is registered to Neil Delacroce of Brooklyn, New York. When the informant entered the office, Ambrose Magliocco, Benny D'Alessandro were present along with Magliocco. Magliocco then advises Greg Scarpa that D'Alessandro was representing Carmine Persico in the dispute over money owed to the informant. During the discussion of the matter, D'Alessandro offered to give the runner back to the informant, provided that the informant would guarantee the payment of monies owed by Carmine Persico, and which was vouched for by Persico. So you can already see, and this is what's weird, because eventually Scarpa would totally back Persico during the Third Colombo War, but you see from day one he's snitching him out on everything. So now he apparently goes to Lo Cicero's house. Now, here's the thing. If a guy is shelved and no longer considered a part of the family, most mob guys won't go near another guy. And this is what gets interesting. Upon arriving at Lo Cicero's house on 8/25 in 1962, the informant was greeted warmly by Lo Cicero, who asked why the informant hadn't been around. Informant advised Lo Cicero that he felt that he was doing him a favor by not coming by, since there was so much heat on Lo Cicero from the IRS and other law enforcement agencies at the time. Lo Cicero replied that he was not going into his shell and that his friends could come by and visit him anytime. Lo Cicero advised Scarpa that he had been to visit Joe Magliocco on Wednesday, 8/22/62, and again told Magliocco to his face he didn't like the way Magliocco handled the election of the family, the election of captains or the family setup. How is that fucking possible when Lo Cicero was on the outs? He wasn't a guy of rank. He had been demoted. Everything had been taken away from him. But now he's going to Joe Magliocco's house to tell him to his face he doesn't like what he's doing. And this is the thing. When you read these things, it jumps off the page like, well, how can that fucking be? And then you go 3 pages back and it's the complete opposite. Now, there may be some that may argue with me and say, well, maybe this is just the FBI's interpretation. And that may be the very case. Because sometimes FBI people write stuff down and not get it right. But this is just fucking ridiculous. Lo Cicero advised Greg Scarpa that so we talked about that. Lo Cicero advised Greg Scarpa that he had questioned Magliocco as to why Greg Scarpa had received his reappointment as captain since Magliocco's election as boss. According to Lo Cicero, Magliocco explained that he was moving slow, but everything could work out if Lo Cicero would just stay with him. Blah, blah, blah. So once again, we see there's another reference to Greg Scarpa being a captain, which now we've heard 4 different stories. Lo Cicero stated to Greg Scarpa he had been visited by members of the Gallo group a couple of days prior, at which time they delivered a message from Larry Gallo to Lo Cicero saying that war would begin on Saturday, 8/25/62. Lo Cicero stated that he went back into the house and called Larry Gallo on the phone and told him that if he was not satisfied with peace that was in existence, and he didn't like the way that things were now, for him to go ahead and start a war. But if he would hold off, Lo Cicero felt that things could be worked out. Lo Cicero then inquired from Greg Scarpa as to whether or not he was able to go see Joe Colombo. Informant acknowledged that he was instructed to go see Joe Colombo, but there's really no more. It was basically payroll bullshit, nothing important. Informant stated that he told Lo Cicero that it was requested on behalf of Joe Magliocco that he helped pay for war expenses. He stated that more or less he blew his stack and told Lo Cicero that the $150 a week Greg Scarpa pays to Lo Cicero is an illegal payment and that he was not going to pay any more out of his pocket from his numbers operation. He stated that Lo Cicero then advised him to pay whatever the assessment was to keep himself safe and deduct it from the $150 a week. So in other words, Scarpa's bemoaning, or at least bitching to Lo Cicero, that he doesn't want to pay Joe Magliocco's war fund. And so Lo Cicero says, to keep yourself safe, listen, I know you're paying me X, Y, and Z, so just go ahead and just just pay that to keep yourself safe. Okay, we can pass that. Sorry, I just have to run through some of these. Okay, so here we go. You ready for this? And I told you this was coming. Informant was appointed a capo regime by Joe Profaci in 1961 at the time of the outbreak of the Gallo-Profaci feud. Since the death of Profaci, the informant has heard from other members of that family. Okay. It stopped right there at 16 for some reason. But, so here you have Greg Scarpa telling another one. So how many times have we heard how he became a captain? Magliocco made him one at his house. Now he's saying that Joe Profaci appointed him one in early 1961, not 2 years or a year and a half into his actual induction into organized crime. It's just fucking nonsense. It's just nonsense. Let's see. Okay, so 9/10/62, Greg Scarpa advises us that he was told by Charles Lo Cicero that Lo Cicero, Jiggs Furlano, and Larry Gallo had joined forces and sent an ultimatum to Joe Magliocco demanding that he step down as head of the family. Informant also advised that he had received the assignment from Charlie Lo Cicero to kill Joe Magliocco. The informant stated that Lo Cicero assigned Greg Scarpa the role to assassinate Magliocco. Lo Cicero directed Greg Scarpa to case the Long Island estate of Joe Magliocco for ways to get in and out when the time came for assassination of Magliocco. So do you see where I'm going with this? And I know it's a little convoluted and all over the place, but do you see how 1 minute Lo Cicero is able to just go talk to Joe Magliocco like there ain't no problems. But if you go further back to last week's show, we know that Lo Cicero had lost all rank within the Mafia and effectively was a pariah. So how is it that after the fact, Joe Magliocco is going to the house, having good meetings, now all of a sudden Lo Cicero wants to kill him? Which I'm not doubting that there wasn't a plot for Magliocco. I'm not doubting that at all. I'm just saying, when you read a book, chapter 1 goes to chapter 2. And usually there's something in between that carries you like a bridge over water to chapter 2. But like you read this and you just see the lies back and forth, like the story keeps changing. And that's the one thing that is very weird about 302s, is that these are the only set of 302s I've ever looked at that are this fucking goofy. You know, it's just, it's wow. So on 9/11/62, the informant advised, you know what, let me just look up something really quick, just because I don't want to misquote something. And this is going to make, I think, a lot of relevance to what we're talking about. Okay. All right. Okay, so keep in mind, all right, 1963, okay, to be specific, let's see if I have, no, it's just, okay, so in 1963 is when Joe Magliocco forms the commission plot. Now, keep in mind, Joe Magliocco would be dead December 28th of 1963, like almost after the Mafia shelves him, he dies, okay? And so that's what makes all of this very, very, very suspect to me. So let's see. So the informant, let me read this part. So the informant reported that he visited Charles Lo Cicero at Lo Cicero's home on Saturday, 9/1/62. He stated that Lo Cicero indicated dissatisfaction with the way that Joe Magliocco was running the family. Lo Cicero advised advised Greg Scarpa that a small commission consulting of Joe Magliocco, John Masurga, Joe Colombo, Salvatore Masaccio, and Charlie Lo Cicero had been set up. Lo Cicero stated that the purpose of this family commission was to handle all the problems arising within the immediate family. The informant stated that Lo Cicero was very active and has made quite a number of contacts, the exact nature the informant was aware of. So basically what you have is Lo Cicero gets shelved, and now he's sort of trying to back a coup. Do I believe it? Absolutely. Absolutely. I have no problem believing that. So on 9/11/62, which is about a year before Magliocco does the commission bullshit and dies, the informant advised that Charles Lo Cicero had stated that he expected to have the commission approval for the assassination of Joe Magliocco on either 9/12 or 9/13 of 1962. He stated that the possibility existed that the commission would handle the execution of Magliocco rather than assigning him the execution, or rather than assigning the murder hit to Lo Cicero. Lo Cicero advised the informant that the peace between the Gallo and Profaci groups was off and that they won't be looking for us, indicating an alliance between Profaci and the Gallos. So Scarpa's telling you in one sentence that peace was off, war was going to start, but that now there's peace between them. He says this in two sentences. War is on. We're going to go to war. And then he states just after that peace between the Gallo and Profaci groups was off, but they won't be looking for us, indicating that there's an alliance between Profaci and the Gallo group. In other words, Magliocco and the Gallos. So those are two different, very big contrasting things. War may be off technically, but secretly there's an alliance. So if there's, in most of Magliocco's problems, we're going right directly to the Gallos. That's why none of this makes any sense to me. Maybe some of you can figure that one out. But I think what this is Scarpa sort of trying to make Lo Cicero out as somebody, and this is a guy that he considered his like best friend, and he's just ratting him out, on every page. Greg Scarpa also reports that other members of the family have expressed major disapproval with the way that Joe Magliocco was running the Profaci family. And what he's doing is posturing. He's posturing because he really doesn't, to my knowledge, and this is the way I kind of see it, maybe this will make a little more sense to all of you. In my opinion, Greg Scarpa wouldn't have known most of the intricate details of, now granted, the gossip about a boss, if people aren't happy, that's a street thing. Everybody knows that. But some of the intricate details of what Magliocco is going to handle, how he's going to handle it, Greg Scarpa wouldn't even know. Okay, so if Greg Scarpa is secretly backing Lo Cicero and his idea of taking over a coup, that would make more sense. And he's only telling the FBI that because if something does go on, he wants to look like he knew the information and had it first. The fact is, Magliocco didn't have, at that time, any problems with outside families. But you're going to find out that Greg Scarpa is going to make an incredible suggestion to the FBI. So the informant then reports that in addition to the three new captains, which included himself, so 1 minute it was a couple months ago, now it's now, these captains were formally appointed by Joe Magliocco. Let's see, Joe Colombo, Tommy DeBella, Sonny Francis, Johnny Otto, Harry Fontana, Sam Badalamenti, Ambrose Magliocco. The informant advised that he went to see Charlie Lo Cicero on 9/14/62 in preparation to make another trip to Long Island to case the home of Joe Magliocco. Informant reported that when he arrived at Lo Cicero's home, Lo Cicero inquired as to whether or not the informant could find his way in and out of Magliocco's home, if necessary, without making a secondary trip. The informant replied that he could, and then Lo Cicero advised him that it would not be necessary for him to make another trip to case the home. Informant reported that Lo Cicero had stated that the murder of Magliocco was not approved by the commission. You're going to love this part. Lo Cicero explained that the Gallos had beat up two captains of Carlo Gambino, and that Gambino had taken no action against the Gallos because he did not want Magliocco to receive the credit for having killed the Gallos. That's bullshit. That is out and out pure bullshit. If you were listening earlier to the show and we were talking about the Q&A, it's been alleged that one of those captains was Neil Della Croce. That is absolutely unequivocally not true. But here are two things that I can tell you for certain. Okay. If the Gallos had beat up one of Carlo Gambino's captains, he would have had them killed. Because at that point, the Gallos were really, they weren't irrelevant, but they were no longer really a part of the mob. They were kind of doing their own thing. They were a wild, nutty fucking bunch. And if you think that Carlo Gambino would have sat back and tolerated that, you're sadly fucking mistaken, because he wouldn't have. But here is the asterisk that comes with that. The asterisk is that Carlo Gambino was shrewd enough to know that if he could manipulate the Gallos, if he could control the Gallos, then he, by proxy, could control the Profaci crime family, which is what he wanted to do. So do I think it's a total stretch that maybe Carlo Gambino didn't react because he wanted to be able to use the Gallos in some form or fashion down the line, or he wanted to manipulate them? I wouldn't put it past him. But Neil Della Croce is allegedly one of these captains that really got beat up pretty bad. If that's the case, and this is why I'm telling you it's not accurate, because I'll give you the plausible deniability of maybe Carlo Gambino's real fucking shrewd and wants to sit back and just let the ebb and flow happen and see. Do you know who Neil Della Croce was? He was one of the most feared members of Murder Inc. This was a guy who didn't fuck around. This is a guy who terrified Carlo Gambino. But also, okay, look at the year. 1962. Gambino was boss of the Gambino crime family in 1962. He took over in 1957. Do you know who his underboss was? Neil Della Croce. So people that keep saying it was a captain, it was Neil Della Croce, are wrong. That's what I'm trying to explain to you in a probably not the right way, is that Neil Della Croce was the underboss of that crime family at the time. So do you think that he would have allowed anybody to touch his captains? But never mind all of that. Let's pretend that Neil Della Croce wasn't the underboss in 1962, okay? Let's pretend that he was beat up. Do you think Neil Della Croce is not going to retaliate for that? Bullshit. Him and Carlo Gambino already had a very fractured relationship anyway. The boss is the boss is the boss. He went along with it. But do you really see a position? Do you really see a position where Della Croce would allow that to happen to himself and not fucking respond? You got to be out of your fucking mind. So like I said, I don't totally buy it, but, you know, I always sort of defer to where there's smoke, there is fire. So it's not to say it's not grounded in some form of reality, but, but from my perspective, I don't really buy it. All right, so on 10/30/62, Greg Scarpa informs us that he continues his relationship with Charlie Lo Cicero and visits Lo Cicero a couple of times a week. He states that Lo Cicero appears very cocky and indicates that the family problems in the Profaci crime family will be settled by the holidays and that the family will return to normal operations. The informant also states that at any time PD Pumps is mentioned, that Lo Cicero advises the informant to just go along with everything he wants and everything he says. Informant is of the opinion, based on conversations with Lo Cicero, that Lo Cicero is depending on the members of the Profaci family who originally went with the Gallos and that who are now under the protection of Carlo Gambino. And the reason why Gambino is doing this is to overthrow Joe Magliocco and to assume control of the family. This is where I kind of sort of agree with Greg Scarpa a little bit. You know, like I said, not everything they say is a lie, but it just kind of shows the jockeying that Gambino is kind of doing. But I honestly think, looking at this, I think that that's just, sort of an assumption, but it's a pretty close assumption because, as we know, really Gambino's sort of control of the Gallos really isn't going to come until Colombo takes over as boss. But it wouldn't surprise me if Gallo wasn't if Gambino wasn't stoking the fires a little bit behind the scenes. I think that probably is a little accurate, but I don't think that Gambino would have backed Lo Cicero in any stretch of the imagination. I just don't think that that's the case. The informant also states that he heard that only one made guy is left with Larry Gallo, and that is John Catrone. He states that all of the other made guys who left the Profaci family and who went to the Gallo side are now under the protection of Carlo Gambino. And that is probably not realistic because I don't think that Carlo Gambino could have put a policy to Joe Magliocco of, well, you can't touch those guys. First of all, if he did that, he would be showing his hand to Magliocco, which would prove to Magliocco that Gambino was, in effect, playing behind the scenes. Now, you will have your detractors who are going to argue with me and say, well, yeah, well, that makes sense because then Magliocco gets in bet with Bonanno, and that's why they want to take over the commission because Gambino's meddling in their business. But in the tradition of sort of how organized crime works, I don't think for 1 second that Gambino would have played his hand that way. He would have tried to be shrewd enough to give the appearance that he was supporting Magliocco. And so the idea that Greg Scarpa feels that Gambino's controlling them, I don't know if he's just trying to stoke the fire with the FBI. But I think that there's just probably 0% chance that Carlo Gambino is going to play those cards of protecting them. Now, Gambino could have told those guys he would protect them, but he can't do that because if one of those guys turns out not to be loyal to Gambino or not to believe that Gambino is going to fully back them, then all they got to do is say something to Joe Magliocco and then all hell's going to break loose. So that's why I said I don't think Gambino would be foolish enough to put himself in a position to trust anybody from the Gallo faction to keep a secret. So I think that this is more sort of inference on Scarpa's behalf than it really is sort of anything. So then basically what Scarpa does at this time is he starts ratting out everybody. He tells them that Fred DeLucia is known as No-Nos, and he's a made guy in the Magliocco crime family and is in the under Captain John Francis or Joe Colombo, but he's not sure which one. Dominic Cialo, he tells them that his nickname is Mimi or Mimi, depending on how you want to say it, and he's a made guy in the Magliocco crime family under Captain John Francis or Joe Colombo. Joseph Vitaco, is known as Jojo and is in the regime of either John Francis or Joe Colombo. Joe Brancato is known to Scarpa as a member of the Magliocco crime family in the regime of, guess who? John Francis, Sonny Francis, or Joe Colombo. Christy Tick Funari. Funari is known to Greg Scarpa as a made guy, but the family he's associated with is unknown to the informant. I find that very hard to believe. He states that Funari can be located in the vicinity of 86th Street between 15th and 28th Avenue in Brooklyn and is knows him as a handler of stolen goods, which we know who Christy Tick Funari is. And how Scarpa cannot know that, but yet he knows all this other shit is just a little strange to me. John Catrone, he's known as Mooney. He was a former made guy in the old Profaci family and has now been with Joe Gallo since the Gallo group left the Profaci family. Greg Scarpa advises, to his knowledge, Catrone is the only made guy left with Larry Gallo at this time. Frank Caruso. Scarpa advises that Frank Caruso, a.k.a. Frankie the Bug, is a made guy in the Genovese crime family. Let's see, Ralph Sprizza. Greg Scarpa advises, also known as Captain Moon, that he's a made guy in the Profaci family. However, he is now in ill health and advanced age and is almost inactive in the organization. Let's see, who else? Joe Traina. And Scarpa advises that Traina is a good made guy and is associated with the Genovese crime family. He advises that Traina is primarily a loan shark and operates on the Lower West Side of Manhattan. Modesto Santoro is a made guy in the Magliocco crime family. Vincent Carraro, also known as Jimmy the Blonde, is made guy and believed to be associated with the Genovese crime family. He states that Carraro lives on and works on 84th Street in Brooklyn and owns and operates a trucking company in Maspeth, Long Island. He just is. So do you see the sheer volume? It would be one thing if you look at other informants, right? Like take John A. White, for example. Do you think A. White had any kind of information that was worth a fuck? No. Right? So it's hard for me to believe that Greg Scarpa knew A, B, and C, but didn't know D and E, but then knew F, G, H, and I. It just, to me, I don't know. We know who Christy Tikfunari is. He was a big guy, a tough guy, an earner, just everything that encapsulates what organized crime is. He knows, but yet Scarpa doesn't know anything about him. It's just kind of strange. So on 11/20/62, he gives the FBI the entire fucking leadership of the family. That was controlled by Joe Profaci and is now made up of the people, the boss. And literally it says boss dash Joe Magliocco, underboss, John Mersaka, which technically he's wrong about that because Sally the Sheik was the underboss at this time. Consigliere, he says, is open, and that's not true because Charlie Lo Cicero was the consigliere at one point, but he was shelved, demoted to captain, and then stripped of all rank. Then he names the captains: John Francis, Joe Colombo, Ambrose Magliocco, Sam Badalamenti, Harry Fontana, John Otto, and Tommy DeBello. Let's see. Informant advised that the position of consigliere in the family has never been filled to date, and that's not true. We know that Sally the Sheik, or excuse me, not Sally the Sheik, John Mersaka became the consigliere. Those are facts. Let's see. Informant states that he believes Lo Cicero's main beef with Magliocco is the fact that the leadership in the family, as it is now, made up of people who are interrelated through blood or marriage and are extremely loyal to Magliocco, and that is the result of any people who are in the family but not related to those personally loyal may be questioned, probably not with given a fair break, and any disputes arising within the family. So his main complaint is that Joe Magliocco has stacked people he can trust and that will be loyal to him, and that's just reality. He goes on to start naming more names. Giuseppe Traina, the father of Joe Traina, and he's a captain in the Carlo Gambino crime family. Let's see. Nick Forlano, a.k.a. Jiggs, is a member of the Profaci crime family, but went with the Gallos and is presently under the protection of Carlo Gambino. Don't believe that to be the case either. Let's see. Joe Lavoda, a.k.a. Minx. Not a made guy, but handles a lot of work in the Shylock business of Johnny Otto. Paul Gambino, the brother of Carlo Gambino and a made guy in the Gambino crime family. Buster Aloy, made guy in the Magliocco crime family who was under the protection of either Joe Colombo or Sonny Francis. Neil Della Croce, captain within the Gambino crime family. No, he's actually the underboss. And this is what he says, which is really kind of weird because this is like not true at all. He broke away from the Profaci family and went with the Gallos. He was chosen by the Gallo group to be a boss in the event there was a successful setting up of a separate family. He is presently under the protection of Carlo Gambino. We know that Della Croce was always he was an Anastasia guy, and then he was a Gambino guy, so that's all nonsense. Anthony Bonacera, also known as Chief, is a made guy under Johnny Otto. Charles Panarella, made guy in the Magliocco crime family under Johnny Otto. Jimmy Clemenza, a.k.a. Jimmy Brown, made guy in the Magliocco crime family under Harry Fontana. Let's see. So on 2/12/13 and 2/18/1963, informant advises, to the best of his knowledge, the breakdown of members of the Magliocco crime family was as followed. So he's going to give him the whole entire fucking hierarchy and give him everybody that is in the family. Johnny Otto, captain. Charles Panarella, captain. Ambrose Magliocco, captain. James Rubertone, Greg Scarpa, captain. Salvatore Scarpa, captain, which Salvatore Scarpa was not a captain. Sam Badalamenti, captain. Tommy DiBella, captain. Dick Fusco, Benedetto D'Alessandro, captains. Harry Fontana, captain. Charles Lo Cicero, captain. Jimmy Clemenza, captain. Salvatore Profaci, captain in New Jersey. So he gives them the whole entire, at least according to him, what the entire hierarchy is. Let's see. Okay, in addition to the above, Informant stated that the regime of Salvatore Masaccio had been split between Masaccio, Sonny Francis, and Joe Colombo, and that the following members of the family who were originally assigned to the regime of Masaccio are now assigned to one of these three captains: Joe Vitacco, Joe Giamarino, Modesto Santoro, and Fred DeLucia. Let's see. What else we got here. Blah, 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 blah. Okay, so I want to get to Joe Valachi, and we're going to end it there this week because I don't want to get it's already been convoluted enough, and next week there's some really big stuff that's going to happen between Karma. He's really going to sort of bulldog. He's going to bulldog Carmine Persico bad. Not only that, but he's going to give up names like Johnny Dio, Peter DeFeo, Paul Castellano. He's going to give up Joe Diamond, of all people, Frank Galluccio, Vinny Gigante. He's going to give up some serious fucking names and tell them a lot of stuff. And what's amazing about all of this, to me anyway, is that the government must not have believed a whole lot of this because they didn't act on anything. And the reason why they didn't act on anything is because in all of these 302s, Greg Scarpa never gives them any crimes. Have I mentioned one crime to you that he's alleged that they have done? No, all he's doing is giving up who's who, who's where, what family does what. But he's not giving them any crimes. So my question is, what the fuck are they paying him for? Okay, I get it. He's giving up certain names and information. I understand that. But he's not giving them any crimes. The FBI was so desperate to know something about the Mafia that he's giving them the whole entire fucking blueprint of organized crime. But he's not giving them any crimes. But next week, he's going to try to bury Carmine Persico with a crime. And that's going to be quite interesting. But like I told you, I wanted to talk about Joe Valachi, and we're going to pretty much do that. So he sits down with the FBI in 8/6/63, and he basically is relaying a conversation that he had with Salvatore Masaccio. And basically, they were talking about Joe Valachi because at this point, Joe Valachi had come forward and was on national TV and all that nonsense. And that they discussed that the government wouldn't be able to use Valachi in any criminal cases because they whacked a corroborator. The informant questioned Masaccio about the above statement, and he said that he was referring to Freddie the Sige, which would have been Freddie Sant'Antonio, and stated that the government was planning to back up Valachi's testimony from Sant'Antonio. And the truth of the matter is about this is that the FBI was not going to use Freddie the Sige. Their backup was Greg Scarpa. In fact, that's where the information came from. So we move to this other piece of paper. This is New York File 92-1459. The subject is Joe Valachi / Greg Scarpa. Informant was contacted on 8/15/63 and at the time was questioned about comments that he could have heard or might have heard from members of organized crime concerning Joe Valachi. And the reason for these questions were to make sure and to ensure that any testimony, any information that Gregory Scarpa had given was parlayed to Joe Valachi to speak about on national television. We also want to ensure the safety of Gregory Scarpa and that Joe Valachi does not repeat that Gregory Scarpa is the one who provided the information to the FBI, then from the FBI to Joe Valachi. Okay? So it goes on further. Informant states that the general consensus of the organized crime group or the opinions appear to be that what was formerly a secret organization is now no longer a secret, but that the organization is just going to continue to do as they did before. He also advised members of the Magliocco crime family He also advised that members of the Magliocco crime family were not concerned over the disclosures made by Valachi because everyone felt that Valachi wasn't even a member of their crime family, was never a made guy, and he was not too familiar with the inner workings, and that the individual members did not appear to be worried about anything over Valachi's disclosures. Okay? And that's very telling because a lot of people were upset, but the crime family that he's apparently involved in isn't concerned because he's not saying anything that can impugn or indict anybody. He's just saying shit that Greg Scarpa told the FBI. He stated that all of the people that he talked to, none of them liked the fact that Valachi made disclosures about Cosa Nostra, but even some of them appeared to be particularly alarmed over the disclosures because they knew it was coming from someone else. And so then what you have is that Scarpa goes on to try to get an insurance from the FBI. And it basically says, it's like 2 pages, I'm just going to sum it up for you, that more or less Informant stated that although he is worried that it will be disclosed that he is the one that provided the information who in turn provided it to the FBI, he is requesting that there be security measures taken place so that Valachi never knows where the information came from because that would put Informant, i.e. Greg Scarpa's life in jeopardy. There you go. There you go. So all of this nonsense about Joe Valachi being the first rat and he told everybody everything is nonsense. Valachi knew the bare minimum. And that everything that had ever been disclosed came from Greg Scarpa, not from Valachi. Go back and watch, seriously, do me a favor. Go onto YouTube and type in Joe Valachi hearings and listen to what he said. They pricked my finger. The Gambino, they call it a family. Everything that Valachi is saying is minuscule. It's very minuscule. He could, he acknowledges there's a boss of a family. It's all very minor shit. And the idea that the government didn't know any of this is bullshit. They had known for 2 years because Scarpa was telling them everything. So all of this nonsense about Valachi's the first guy to bring it forward, he fucked the mob, he ruined the mob, it's just bullshit. All Valachi was the fucking poster boy for the information, but all that information had come from Greg Scarpa, and Valachi did know certain things. But you heard it here. The crime family wasn't upset because Valachi was not a made guy within the crime family, and that he didn't have access to the information. And the reason why the Mafia is not worried is because Valachi's not telling anything of importance. He's acknowledging the existence, which pissed a lot of people off, but they're not concerned with it. They're not worried about it because he's not giving up names. He's not saying in 1962 there was a commission meeting and this one got whacked and this one's mother got fucked with a shovel. He's not saying anything. Everything he is saying is just relative shit. Shit the FBI had known for a long time. The FBI knew, J. Edgar Hoover knew years before the Mafia existed. They didn't understand the structure. They didn't understand the inner workings. They didn't understand the depth of union corruption, but they knew it was there. But it's not until Greg Scarpa comes along in 1958 when he starts telling them fucking everything. Then it's not till 63 until Valachi becomes the poster boy for that. And like I said, go watch what Valachi said. He said nothing of goddamn consequence. Okay, yeah, he admitted it exists. He admitted there's a boss. He admits they prick your finger and you would get inducted. These were things that the government already knew. And so did Valachi have inroads to the Mafia? Of course. He was an associate, whatever the case may be. He'd killed people for them, okay? But he was not a made guy. And that's why the rest of the family doesn't give a shit, because they're like, you know what? We don't like the fact that he's acknowledging it, but he's not giving them anything. Because believe you me, 2 things are very important that I want you to get from this. Okay? If he had given them anything of consequence, it probably would have refuted some of the things that Scarpa said. In fact, I'm sure that there were some disagreements on how it went. But number 2, neither one of them are giving them crimes. You mean to tell me that for 3.5 years, at this point, Scarpa's telling them everything. They make Valachi the poster boy, and not a single time neither one of them ever indicted anybody in a crime? They know that Carlo Gambino's the boss. Surely they could have prosecuted him for that. He's not giving them crimes. And so some people will say, well, that's not a rat move. No, it is a rat move. Sitting with the feds on any level is a fucking rat move. I don't care who you are. You sit with the feds and you give them any information, true, accurate or not, you're a fucking rat. That is the fucking truth. You are a fucking rat. But some will make that argument. Well, he's not giving them crimes. Yeah, but he's giving them the blueprint. It's like the fucker that draws the treasure map and includes so much description. I can already tell that what the FBI is doing is just cataloging this. And so when people ask me all the time, to round this out, when people ask me all the time, who's the biggest rat in the history of organized crime? It's that motherfucker, Greg Scarpa. Because they didn't know any of this shit. They knew certain things. They knew the mafia existed. They knew that they were involved in corruption and other things. But this motherfucker gives them the whole background, gives them the blueprint. And it's not just like he's fucking angry and he's trying to get out of crimes and he doesn't want to go to jail. He's just a piece of shit, selfish, money-hungry cocksucker is all he is. Because he knows he can't earn his way into the mafia on his own because he's not smart enough. So what does he do? Pay for play. I'll give him just enough to keep the motor going. And next week when I tell you what they started paying him, it's going to blow your fucking mind. You're going to sneeze and blow your balls throughout your asshole. I'll just tell you right now, $75,000, $36,000, $100,000, $58,000, $42,000. And this isn't a year. These are like lump sum payments they're giving him for all of the information. And I wrote down the figure. Between last week and this week, it's over $550,000 he's already made. And this is in between 1958 and 1963. That is a shitload of fucking money. I don't even know what the inflation is. Let me look it up on my phone. We'll see what it is. We'll just go with 600,000 because that's just the easiest way. So we'll go 600 K in 19. We'll just take 1960. Okay. That's over, let's see, 1960 is equivalent to purchasing. Okay, so $600,000 in 1960 is equivalent to purchasing $6 million. Just almost 6.1, well, $6 million. $6 million. Now, some of you are going to scoff at that and say there's no way they paid him that amount of money. Well, they did. And he was kicking up. Okay. Because Greg Scarpa died a wealthy man. He was not poor by any stretch of the imagination. These are numbers that are non-redactable. And he did pay tax on it. Just so that you know, he did pay tax on it. They took taxes out at the end of the year. They did all of that because I have that paperwork too. But this is unredacted files. Nobody has this. Everybody has the files, but they see the black smudge print. I have unredacted shit. Doesn't matter where I got it and who I got it from. But they're unredacted. Now, as time period went on, probably starting in 65, his payments started to go down. They started paying him less and less because by the time they hit 1965 to 1970, they had more rats that were telling the FBI stuff. So the quality of the information began to decline. Now, what Greg Scarpa did with that money, I have no fucking idea. I really don't. But just looking at and see, I gotta tell you, just looking at the numbers, I don't know if that was after taxes. I'm assuming it's before taxes. But that's how Greg Scarpa gets in the numbers game. That's how he gets in the loan sharking game. You know, did Greg Scarpa die with 20 million? No, not at all. Not at all. But that's a shitload of fucking money. But he gambled a lot too. And he opened up businesses, bars, clubs, this, that, and the third. He was a shit businessman. A shit fucking horrible businessman. And some people won't like that. Some people like to put Greg Scarpa on a fucking pedestal. He was a fucking killer and a maniac. Do not get it twisted. This is a guy who was getting paid by the FBI. You know, and once he gets to a certain point where he starts to rise in the family, the payments from the FBI back off. And now that he has all of this money, he can start spreading it around. Wasn't paying no tax on any of that past like 1970. But according to everything, he doesn't get made a captain until 1977. But if he tells the FBI he's a captain and he invents that story and that narrative, naturally, when he's explaining the kick-up process to them of how much money he's got to go where, they don't mind overpaying him because look at what he's just given them. Now they got an FBI dossier on some fucking 500 fucking people. But you have to ask yourself, why did he talk about no crimes? Because surely the FBI sitting across the desk and say, well, this is all fine and great, Greg. We appreciate all you're doing. We're paying you well. But where's the criminality here? Because it's not a crime just to be an organized crime. It's not a crime to be a boss. Why aren't you telling us crimes? And my theory is because he didn't know anything. And my other theory to that is A, he didn't know anything. B, he did not want to act complicit in anything. That was another thing he did very well, is try to remove himself from doing anything wrong. But he also knew that just giving them this was enough for them. And we see a transition in like 1978 where now the FBI wants murders and mayhem and they want that information. The narrative changes because the legal system changes. The Justice Department changes. But that does not stop the FBI from the 80s and 90s letting him kill motherfuckers on their watch. And some will say, and they're probably right in saying, he was the greatest schemer ever. He's a rat, low-bottom piece of shit fuck. But that's a schemer. Because not only was the FBI sucking off the FBI's tit, but they allowed him to murder and do whatever the fuck he wanted. In a criminal world, that's like hitting the fucking lottery. But at the end of the day, it also makes you a scumbag. And it's my firm belief that if he had the capacity to earn on his own, it wasn't bitching about having to pay $100 because he didn't have $100. So all the money he had paid prior to 1963 from 58 to 62, which I think it was something like $200,000, $300,000. Where the fuck did all that money go? Was he squirreling it away? Why couldn't he afford $100? The reason why he says he couldn't was because he was a degenerate gambler. He was a drug addict, which is true. A booze hound. He was taking care of different women in different apartments. But he also had to give the appearance that he had no fucking money because he wasn't a captain. He was a fucking soldier. And how the fuck is he going to explain to Joe Magliocco, which I don't think they ever had a conversation, I got to be honest with you, but how the fuck would he explain to anybody that's a higher up where all that money was coming from if he's got nothing to show for it? And there you have it. And so, like I say, anytime we discuss these things, like I told you, 5% of what they tell you is true. 5% of what they say is accurate. The rest of it's all bullshit. I get it. If somebody came to me today and said, Jeff, every week on your Mafia show, I want you to lie about Joey Merlino, and I'm going to pay you $500,000 every time you do it, but you got to say nasty shit. Do you think I would do it? Absolutely. And then you know what I would do? I'd say, hey, Joey, by the way, I'm going to give you like 20% of what they're giving me. I'm just going to say nasty shit. Is that cool? Yeah, fuck it. Just give me my 30, 40%. I don't give a fuck. But that's sort of how it works. And I can't blame somebody for doing that. I don't like the ratting shit. I despise it. It's despicable. I fucking hate it. But on some sort of visceral level, I completely and unequivocally understand it. If somebody tells you I'm going to let you rob 20 banks, I'm never going to arrest you, but you got to, we'll let you, and we'll pay you to do it. But we're testing out how alarm systems work. You're not going to do it. And eventually you may have to testify. You're not going to do that. Most of you would. Well, take testifying even off the thing. We are going to pay you X, Y, and Z to go rob 30 banks. But all you have to do is we'll let you keep a part of the money, but all you have to do is tell on other bank robbers you know of. You don't have to give us the crimes, just give us their names. Most of you would do that. Most of you would. I hate to say it. Me, I would invent names. Are you kidding me? I wouldn't give them any real name. I'd invent shit. And as long as they keep paying me, I will keep inventing shit. Joe Bob robbed the bank at Independence Boulevard. I would just make shit up. That's the problem with the feds. That's the problem with no oversight by the federal government. What was it? Earlier this year, we mentioned something about, and I can't remember the exact figure. I'll probably fuck this up, but something like they'd given away $35 million in DEA informants, none of which led to any major convictions. $35 million of your hard-earned tax money to rats. Look at what they've paid informants in lesser cases. $5 million, $6 million, $2 million, $3 million. No shit, you're going to keep stalling and making shit up. Because the more shit you make up, the more money you're going to fucking get. And if you're a criminal fuck who doesn't care anything about anybody and have no scruples, no standards, no class, and no street acumen, it's a win-win for you. So you have to understand it on that level. And final, I'm just going to say this. A lot of people are not going to like what I'm saying about Greg Scarpa. They're going to say, oh, he was a tough guy. You wouldn't say it to his face. Yeah, you're right. I probably wouldn't. I was a psychopath. But a part of what I do is try to show you how the Justice Department manipulates people. They want you to tell you that this is for the greater good. They're criminals and they're doing a noble thing. They want to play morality when it serves them best. But that morality goes way out the fucking window when a rat tells them what